Previously on the UFTA Files.
While the official start of the modern UFO era is usually dated to the mid-20th century, the first mass reports of "what is that?" sightings occurred near the end of the 19th century. In late 1896, in Sacramento, California, thousands of citizens reported seeing a bright light in the sky at a height of approximately 1,000 feet, traveling over the city in an apparently purposeful way. This incident is generally called the first in what would be known as the phantom airship phenomenon. Now, in fact, similar sightings had been reported in Stillwater, Minnesota in 1871 and Hastings, Minnesota in 1878. But with characteristic reticence, Minnesota has declined to press the claim for first phantom airship sighting. We're modest that way. Be that as it may, after multiple sightings along the West Coast over the winter of 1896, the phantom airship, or airships, as there seemed to have been a fleet of them, began to make their way east. A little historical background is useful here. Airships themselves weren't science fiction in 1897. In fact, the first hot air balloon had been launched in 1782 in France by the Montgolfier brothers. And by mid-19th century, ballooning was all the rage, with both sides using balloons for observation during the American Civil War.
Plans for large-scale dirigibles, capable of transporting multiple passengers over long distances, were well underway by the 1890s. So while it would have been highly unusual to see something floating in the sky that wasn't a bird, it wasn't impossible. But there weren't any such craft in operation in this country yet, and the marvelous flying machines that people began reporting during those several months of late 1896 through spring 1897 were worlds more sophisticated than anything actually flying, perhaps literally so. On Sunday, April 11th, 1897, the aerial miracle came to Minnesota at last. The next morning's papers trumpeted the news.
The Minneapolis Times, which identified itself as the official paper of Minneapolis and Hennepin County, so we know it was a serious publication, shared these exciting details of the mysterious night visitor. Flying along in his long, low, rakish craft, the citizen of Mars executed more maneuvers in the heavens over Minnetonka last night than could the substance of 10,000 4th of July rockets. Now, I don't want to impugn the journalistic integrity of the unknown writer of this article, but I can't help but feel this is just a trifle sensationalistic. I mean, describing their ship as rakish, when everyone knows the citizens of Mars drive nice, sensible, slow-moving blimps. Whatever. The report continued in an ominous tone. The plain fact remains that all's not well in the skies of Minnesota. Admittedly, the reporter wasn't himself a first-hand observer of the wonder. However, they interviewed an unimpeachable witness, one R.G. Adams, who watched the airship alongside his even more unimpeachable mom and dad. The report continued, "Last night, about 8 o'clock, R.G. Adams caught sight of the strange craft flying low in the heavens. He called his father and mother to witness the phenomenon, and with the aid of field glasses was able to see the outlines of the ship.
Through the glass, I saw an object that appeared to be about 18 or 20 feet long. It was shaped like a cigar, and in the middle and on top of it was a square light. This light was ultimately white, green, and red as the navigator cut through the sky. He was going at a high rate of speed when I saw him. He would tip and shoot down for, say, half a mile with a green light, and then mount with the speed of a rocket, showing a white light.
As he floated, he changed his light from red to green. The light looked as big as a plate through the glass, but to the naked eye appeared about the size of an orange. I could distinctly see the outlines of the craft when it dipped.
Perhaps anticipating some doubt about the honesty of his testimony, Mr. Adams added, "I was not dreaming, and if I was, I'm sure my folks were not." That's good enough for us, R.G. Surprisingly, the Times was ready with an explanation for the sighting. The managers of the Minneapolis Cycle Show are of the opinion that the airship now hovering in the vicinity of Minneapolis is none other than the invention of Carl Zemwitz, the San Francisco man who wrote the managers of the show a month ago that he would be in Minneapolis or hereabouts during the period of the cycling exposition and would like the opportunity to exhibit his invention during the week. This impresario Zemwitz described his flying machine with Barnum-esque hyperbole, declaring that it had an electrical apparatus for illumination, can soar upward like a cock sparrow in the morning sunlight, can dart and dive like a bat at sundown, or poise in midair like a chicken hawk. Entirely coincidentally, the paper ran several prominent advertisements for this cycling expo in the same issue. I've not been able to find any other information about this Carl Zemwitz or evidence that he and his Wundermaschinen actually made the promised appearance at the cycling exposition. But never mind. There were plenty of other possible explanations for the arrival of the airships. On the same day the Times broke the news on the front page, the rival Minneapolis Journal ran this modest account under an advertisement for Madame Yale's hair tonic on page 6. Cavorted in midair, hundreds soberly assert they saw the airship, and saloons closed at 9, too. That kind of snarkiness, Minneapolis Journal, is why you were not the official newspaper of Hennepin County. A tone of, well, let's call it skepticism, ran through the Journal's article, in which the reporter groused, judging by the number of telephone calls to the paper, there's no use in printing anything, because the people have seen and know all there is to say.
The paper goes on. It is also remarkable that everyone who sees the ship gives it a different form from his neighbor. Its length varies from the diameter of an orange to 60 feet. Back over at the Times, on the other hand, the evening edition hastened to reassure a presumably panicked populace by reporting that Professor Howe, astronomer at Illinois' Evanston Observatory, had proclaimed that similar lights seen over Chicago a few nights before were undoubtedly
the effect of the atmosphere on the star Alpha Orionis.
Sure, Dr. Howe. Or is that what they want us to believe? Whether explained by atmospheric aberrations, eccentric inventors, or something else, the airships kept on coming. Or at least, reports of them did.
Dateline April 13th, Milan, Minnesota. What is supposed to be the airship was seen hovering over Lac-Qui-Parle Lake at about 8 o'clock by a hunting party consisting of L.J. Monty, Dr. K. Lundeval, E.S. Olson, and C.R.C. Blum, all of unquestioned veracity. The airship was in sight for about 30 minutes and was going in an easterly course.
Dateline, April 13th, Preston, Minnesota. The family of Thomas Quinn reports having seen the airship Sunday night. They say what they saw was a crescent-shaped object with a green light in the center. Dateline, April 13th, Virginia, Minnesota. Considerable excitement prevails here over the airship which several of our prominent citizens claim they saw last evening. It appeared about 1 mile over the city and was traveling in a northwesterly direction. Both red and green lights were plainly discernible. Dateline, April 13th, Bird Island, Minnesota. The airship was seen here tonight at 8:20 going directly north. Thomas Marshall of Lake Lillian was called up by telephone and was told to look out for it. Mr. Marshall saw it plainly and said it kept due north and was going very fast. Back in the Twin Cities, local publications kept up the breathless coverage. On April 13th, the Minneapolis Tribune ratcheted up the drama with the first report of a close encounter of the third kind, first-hand observation of the entities piloting the craft.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Wonder, mysterious airship seen by Stuart Macroft was but a short distance from Earth, manned and guided by one or more living beings. Extra, extra.
The story related the account of young Stuart Macroth, an employee of Flower City National Bank, who was riding his bike between 10:30 and midnight in downtown Minneapolis.
Out kind of late on a work night, weren't you, Stu?
Suddenly, he saw a clear light moving about a quarter of a mile in the air above and toward him. In an instant, it was immediately above his head, and in another instant, speeding rapidly away from him toward the north. According to Mr. Macroth, the flying machine was shaped like an ordinary boat. In the bow was a large, bright light, and on either side a red and green light, and in the stern a pale light. Mr. Macroth solemnly asserts that he saw in the machine living persons, men, women, and children, moving about as if very busy.
One has to wonder what time the saloons closed on this particular evening.
Perhaps seeking to forestall the kind of questions we have already raised here, that is, what kind of young man is out cycling near midnight in the city center, the Tribune assured its readers, Mr. Macroth is a reputable young man and could have no reason for telling such a story unless it were true.
Maybe, but I still wonder how Stuart's banking career progressed after his 5 minutes of fame.
Meanwhile, the Minneapolis Journal, still the spoiler, published its confident rebuttal to all the hullabaloo. Extra, extra, fooled the whole town. How enterprising 8th Ward youth made people's eyes bulge. Extra, extra. I would have expected that it was the aliens who had bulging eyes. The story purported to solve the airship mystery by telling of an unnamed youth who had been seen constructing elaborate balloons out of scrap materials and affixing candles to them. Rather bizarrely, the newspaper made a point of calling out various individuals whom it declared to have been made laughingstock of a boy.
Messrs. Adams, Barney, people of the Oliver Presbyterian Church, and all of the rest of you who have been seeing the airship the past several nights past, know that you have been deceived, shamefully and ignominiously deceived by a boy.
Given its willingness to publicly embarrass those who had reported the airships, it's somewhat curious that the paper was so reticent to reveal the name of the alleged culprit, or indeed to follow up in any ensuing issue with the full story of this remarkable and widespread hoax. Really, Minneapolis Journal, you're not doing your official paper of Hennepin County hopes any favors here. The real answer to the mystery came, rather improbably, from tiny Pine City, some 70 miles north of the Twin Cities, on April 13th. As reported from that metropolis, in a special to the St. Paul Globe, the cat is out of the bag and the famous airship has been investigated. The crew got out of supplies and anchored just east of the town of Chengwatna Dam and came across to Pine City for supply. Well, that's unexpected. The paper continued. The night passenger train, which arrives here at 2 a.m., pulled in just as the aerial wonder was settling down to earth. Thomas J. Burke, a passenger who got off here, was so excited that he rushed to Gautrey's stable, ordered a team, and started at once for the point where the ship alighted. While the tourists were at the Pioneer House in Pine City laying in supplies, Mr. Burke was at the Chengwatana inspecting the curious visitor. Tom says the thing is a very curious invention and a great improvement on the jaunting article used in Ireland when he was a boy. Tom says the name on the car was Prosperity, and that from printed matter, which he inspected, he found that it had been in the air for over 5 months, looking for a suitable chance to light. It started on again at 4 o'clock a.m., and at sunrise was just fading out on the western horizon. Seems like this kind of big news, solving a mystery that baffled and excited the entire country for months, deserves a more prominent place than a small inside column on page 4. And indeed, the news doesn't seem to have reached the world at large, because the very next day, the Minneapolis Times published the real solution to the mystery. An article was prominently displayed in that day's issue under the headline, "The Mystery Solved," and shared this confident assertion: "Undoubtedly, aerial navigation is a fixed fact." A bold claim. Go on. Why doubt the reality of an airship after witnessing as an actual fact so improbable a thing as the selling of Anderson pianos as low as $242? Wait, what now? So if you want to resolve the mystery of the airship, come into the assignee sale of the Century Piano Company's stock and you'll see a thing so strange that the airship will no longer be in it. Aw, a crummy commercial. Meanwhile, across the state, the sightings continued. Dateline, April 16th, Little Falls, Minnesota. The airship arrived here last night and was seen by many citizens. L. Van Heck of the Interstate Milling Company was awaiting its arrival with powerful field glasses. He claims it was a large machine, very much in appearance like a huge butterfly. Van did not discover the ship's propelling power, but saw something resembling the fans of a windmill, which he thinks were responsible for its rapid flight over the city. Hedging its bets, the Little Falls Weekly Transcript circumspectly added, "There is a rumor around town that Dr. Merrill, Billy Irwin, and William Ford were flying a large kite with Chinese lanterns attached to it at about that same time."
Dateline, April 15th, Sleepy Eye, Minnesota.
The famed airship passed Sleepy Eye tonight at 9:02, just as passenger train number 7 left here. It was headed west and traveled as if in a trial race with the train. George Somerville, an attorney of this place, and Emil Wicherski of the New Ulm Review, first sighted the ship at Essig. The aerial mariner speeded his craft so as to keep ahead of the train and entertained the passengers by frequent changes of signals, first flashing the red and then the green light. Dateline, April 16th, Howard Lake, Minnesota. Saw the airship. A Howard Lake doctor says it shows colored lights. Dr. E.Y. Chilton, member of the State Medical Board and president of the Village School Board, adds his testimony to that of the many who have seen the airship. At 10 o'clock on Wednesday evening, he and E.C. Tuttle, the village barber, were standing in front of the city hall when they were surprised at the sight of a moving light northwest of town over the north end of the lake. The light was moving westward. It changed color from time to time, being sometimes white and again green, then red, and at times purple. In addition to the light, the doctor reports seeing a dark object in connection with it, but is not prepared to state whether this object was nebulous or a mechanical structure. Nothing since the announcement in 1890 of the child born south of town with teeth and a full complement of hair and speech has awakened so much interest in this section. Wow. Well, if a member of the state medical board and school board president says it's true, then... Wait. What was that? Dateline, April 19th, Howard Lake, Minnesota.
To the editor of the Times. My attention has been called to an article in the April 16th issue of your paper purporting to be from your Howard Lake, Minnesota correspondent in regard to the airship of which there has been so much said and written. In the first place, I do not believe that it was ever written or emanated from your Howard Lake correspondent, whoever he may be, but let it come from where it may, I wish to denounce it as absolutely false in every particular, and that your correspondent, whoever he may be, had no foundation for writing up such an article. I therefore request and demand that you retract and make as public your retraction as you have the article in question. Very respectfully yours, Dr. E.Y. Chilton.
Oops. Well, given this clarification, I think only one conclusion can be drawn. The Martian aeronauts got to Dr. Chilton and coerced him into changing his story. Interestingly, the very next year, in 1898, E.Y. Chilton was elected to the Minnesota State Senate from District 46. Could it be that he was actually a human-alien symbiote placed in high office through the collusion of earthly governmental authorities and the aliens who invaded Minnesota in the spring of 1897? Ancient astronaut theorists say it's possible.
Was Minnesota briefly invaded by Martians in 1897? Or were the denizens of the phantom airships actually visitors from our own future, perhaps sent back to change the course of history and save humanity from self-destruction? Or could it be neither of these options? Having made a study of the case, I am prepared to step forward with my own bold theory. Consider that the phantom airships were first seen near the end of the year in California, and that over the course of time made their way across the country in a generally northern direction. Remember, too, that the airship was described as having a boat-like appearance, and that it had bright flashing lights in red, green, and white. It appeared only at night, and seems to have paused over just about every little village and major city along its route. I think you know where I'm going with this. Is it possible?
Next time on The Oofda Files.